Hello, everyone. This is Xander Broffel, Director of Marketing Operations with CS2, and this is the Revenue Growth Architects podcast. Joining me today is Senior Director of Marketing Operations and our friend, Joy Martinez. How are you doing today, Joy?
Hey, Xander. Thanks so much. I'm doing great.
We've now had you on for quite a few episodes. It's always comfortable when I'm hosting with you because we just go back and forth. We kind of see eye to eye with a lot of different projects and topics. So I'm excited for today's episode.
Yeah, I definitely am too. Thanks.
Good. Well, speaking of today's episode, we are talking about just a riveting topic, which is opt-in and opt-out, GDPR, compliance, privacy, all of the good stuff. And I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time, if you do it right, this type of project can make a huge, huge impact on your business. What do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's maybe not compliance doesn't always sound like it's going to be, the most exciting topic that anybody feels like working on in marketing ops, right? But it's super important. It's also, required for everybody. And it's something that you need to get comfortable with and understand how to do, understand the laws. There's just so much that goes into it. So excited to kind of dive into all the details and all the things that we should consider when doing some sort of opt-in compliance program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know when we're working with clients, like compliance isn't fun, but a good customer experience is. And
Yeah.
this is an area that we can really make that process exceptional for clients. And especially for people who are looking at buying or current customers. If we can make sure that they know that their data is being protected, that they are being thoughtfully marketed to, it can go a really long way. So that's something that we should definitely kind of have our hat on today, is not just thinking about am I fulfilling what needs to be done, but am I doing it in the way that my buyer is going to be most pleased with, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's kind of a two-sided coin because you have like, what do I need to do legally, right? Like, what do the laws actually say so that we're not increasing our risk, with doing business with our customers? But then what do we want to do ethically, right? Like, what does the experience look like? How do we want to treat our customers or potential customers? And what do we need to do in order to make that happen? So, I know a lot of people kind of sometimes put the bare minimum in place of what's legally required of them, but it really can go a lot further than that. And there's still a lot that marketers can do to reach their potential, buyers, and really create a great experience. So hopefully some of our tips today will give some ideas to some people.
Fantastic. Well, Joy, let's jump right in. First of all, we've alluded a little bit to the buyer's experience, but
Yeah.
why is an opt-in management and compliance process important for both the organization and your end users?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of started to highlight it, but I mean, data privacy laws and these regulations are not going away. If anything, they're just going to keep coming. Um, you know, we've seen over the years a lot of data privacy laws come into the market. So, just for some background, I used to work for a data privacy company. I used to work in data security as well. So, I feel like it's sort of ingrained in me just to like want to really understand these regulations and like the impact as a marketer that it has, on the marketing team and what we're able to do as a company. So, I remember even like getting governors on the phone from different states who are starting to put out different data privacy regulations. And some of that might have to do with email marketing and how you can communicate to somebody, but some of it is how you store their data, how you retain their data, how you make their data available to them if they were to request and say like, hey, what kind of data do you have on me? And choose, bits and pieces that they may want deleted out of your systems. And do you have the data readily available? Is it, trackable where you even know what systems you have what data, right? And so I got really passionate about it when I worked at that data privacy company. I also was doing consulting back when GDPR went into effect as well. And we had a lot of clients coming to us super last minute, like in I think it was May 25th, if I remember the date exactly, to 2018. And in early May, April, we still have people come into a screen because it's like the enforcement's coming, into play here soon. Help us set up this. What do we need to do? What do we need to know? And there was a lot to learn, when it came to, our clients were trusting us to be able to help them stay compliant. But then again, you have the side of the equation too, where it's not just being compliant. Like, what do you want to do ethically, right? And what does your legal team, have an opinion on it? And, what do they feel the level of the risk that they want to take on, as a company? And what are they guiding as your legal counsel? So there's a lot that goes into it. And as marketers, I mean, one thing that we can do is just get really familiar with the laws, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's maybe a little dry material for some of us, but you know, the more that you are comfortable with it, the more confident you can be in ensuring that you are not only creating something where you're being legally compliant, but you also can create that buyer experience. And I find that, the better that I understood laws myself, the more I was able to speak to it and be like a leader in the company where I could, suggest what we do and make recommendations. So it's important.
Absolutely. I was in-house during that time, and I was working so closely with our legal team. The person that I was working with, she was fantastic. I mean, to the point where she's still like speaking in front of legal teams about
Nice.
data compliance and privacy, right? Like it just became the sole focus of hers.
Mhm.
And it was a lot to do, right? The thing that I was really happy with is that we kind of saw the future of, yes, this was only, this was GDPR. This is only impacting the EU, but we knew that other things were coming down the pipeline. So it was like, you know what, let's just build a really good policy. Let's treat it globally. And as soon as other states started to pull things in, as soon as we started talking about Castle, as soon as we started talking about all
Mhm.
these things, it was like we had built such a good program that just applied everywhere, that we didn't have to make systematic changes every time that a new state brought something in, because we had something that covered pretty well.
Yeah.
And I could only imagine if we were trying to build it so it was like, well, let's just fit this for California, let's just fit this for
Yeah.
GDPR, it would become so difficult to manage.
hmm It's really one of those things that, like, if you think of very high level, like, how do we want to communicate and store data on, anybody that we're potentially working with or people we are working with, you know, once, like, and I feel like once GDPR went into effect and people saw, like, oh, like, they can actually enforce this. This is actually working successfully for the people that put this in place, right? Like, other countries will definitely follow suit at some point, right? And if you can't nail down from a country perspective, like a federal law, that's why the states here in the United States are coming out with their own regulations that they're getting approved. I mean, Virginia's come out with stuff, California, there's other states. And even if it doesn't get approved the first time, if those bills are coming, you know, um, coming up and the regulations are being looked at often, it's only a matter of time. It's not that it won't ever change or that it's going to take years and years. It's just a matter of time. And so if you set yourself up right from the beginning to really make it flex and work and almost already be prepared where it's not going to feel like a big hit to your marketing or something when you have to make changes, like, that's the approach I think that we need to take. And I think that's the approach too that will ultimately give that best buyer experience that you're looking for too. Like,
Yeah.
how do we want to do right by our buyers, and how can we operationally set things up and track so that we can do that. We could provide any information. If we get audited, like, we're clear, and make it very seamless, right? Let alone avoid fines and all the, potential major issues that you can deal with down the road. So,
100%. And then you also get some added benefit. I mean, I remember for us, it was like, well, let's clean out the database because we had a bunch of people that we didn't
yep.
really have a strong reason to hold on to. Well, all of a sudden
Mhm.
now our database size was less, we had better targeting, all of that good stuff. So you can find benefits, and I encourage everybody, if it's been since 2018 that you have looked at this, it's a good time to
Mhm.
possibly revisit and be like, did we set it up the way that we needed to? Because I know for me, we rebuilt our entire program after we had already stood it up. So it was just like, oh, now that we know
Yeah.
some more, let's
Yeah.
let's really try to improve this.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
it's
that's
not
been
just like a
5 years.
one-time thing, right? Yeah,
Yeah, that's been 5 years. Like, that's a long time to, so it is a good time to kind of relook at things. And it's to your point, a perfect time to go through some data hygiene, do some data purging, do some enrichment. Do you have a ton of records in your database without country, right? Like, start doing things to get yourself prepared for these regulations that are just going to keep coming onto the market, right?
absolutely, absolutely. And the more that you can do now, I remember talking to talking to teams, and I still do it today, right? Is I would rather we start trying to capture opt-in information before these programs go into effect, rather than
Like,
getting blindsided.
yeah.
If you start thinking like the United States is kind of the obvious one, right? For the most part, a lot of us are doing implicit opt-ins. It's more of an opt-out sort of mentality. Well, if 5 years ago you started gathering opt-ins from the
Mhm.
United States people, now you have a database of opted-in folks, which is so much stronger of a database than an
For
implicit
sure.
database that you're just capturing names and hoping that they don't opt out.
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately, it's not just about communicating that with them. It's like you said, once you have a strong database where you know these people have opted into you, like those are stronger people to drive pipeline. And at the end of the day, like we all want to drive pipeline and revenue. So, I think it's really positive, all the things that can come from setting, a program up like an opt-in compliance program. And, to your point, it's just a good time to be able to data hygiene, get your database really clean. It'll help improve your email rates, right? Like, I mean, all together across the board, there's just benefits to getting set up for the future. And you never know if your go to market strategy is going to change for the company, right? And so maybe you're starting, a PLG strategy, or, maybe you have expansion plans in 5 years, you're going to be expanding into Europe or, whatever. And so the sooner that you can get set up and get a structure in place, the better, because you'll be more equipped to deal with, less hurry up, like let's hurry up and get this in place, like impact, right? When when you do expand or you do change strategy. So because sometimes you can't anticipate that, or maybe you work for a company that acquires other companies, or you're merging with another company, and now all of a sudden you're in a market and working with people that like you've never worked with before, so it's just good to plan ahead and know how you're going to roll people into that program on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely. That's great. So you've sold me. It's important. We've got compliance, we've got fines, we have a good customer experience, we have a cleaner
Yep.
database after doing all of this stuff. By the way, we don't have fines after we do this stuff. We avoid the fines after we do this
Yeah,
stuff. That's
there
what's
you go.
so let's give our listeners some tips. Kind of I think that we're going to focus it from a MOPS perspective, but this is relevant for RevOps teams because this is impacting us from, lead all the way up to cash, all the way up to customers.
Mhm.
So let's give some tips to make sure that the team has something that they can really take back to their organizations, even if they have something in place, and maybe even make it better.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first tip is just like read up on the laws if you haven't. Like, again, might be dry material, but, just go sit out in the sun, warm up your toes, and pull up some data privacy laws. you know, just get familiar with them and understand how the language is written. And, I've done lots of reading on them, over the years. And, it helps to, I think, be able to form an opinion on what you may want to suggest to the company or to your legal team for approval, and will ultimately set the stage for how you actually build out this so-called opt-in program, right? So
Yeah.
I think really getting that understanding under your belt is like first and foremost. And then I think a big thing, which I'll be curious to see what you've seen across maybe your teams or clients that you're working with, but a big thing is just alignment, right? A big thing everybody always talks about is marketing and sales alignment, but You think about any kind of tools within marketing or sales or customer success or any kind of tools where we are potentially bringing new people into the database or communicating with people, uh, you're going to need to follow opt-in, opt-out, regulations. So you definitely need to be, in good terms and in alignment and working with those, revenue teams to be able to be on the same page. Like if somebody opts out in outreach or sales loft over here, are you going to also opt them out of, your marketing automation platform emails or like, how are you going to handle that? And then let's say customer success is on the phone with the customer and they say, hey, like, I would really like to, unsubscribe from this thing and they update it in the CRM. Is that going to communicate to the other tools that need to know that? Right. So I think alignment between those teams and just communication is super important, or, you may miss things because it's ultimately we kind of talk about marketing ops, but it's not just a marketing ops thing. It's a company thing. So I think marketing ops has a seat to lead the discussion and put forth recommendations, but it's definitely not just within marketing ops, and you're definitely going to need to bring other teams into the equation. Have you kind of seen that across your clients too?
Yeah, absolutely. I just did a opt-in preference center project where our primary objective was to take like you say, outreach, Marketo, Salesforce, get all of these pieces aligned. And then we launched, and then the next month, one of the people that was on that team was like, hey, by the way, I'm bringing in another tool that's going to communicate with end users. So now we got to pull that team in and start to work on, making sure that all of the plumbing is working together. And that's key, right? I think that like what's top of mind for me, I can only speak to myself, is the communication side of things. But it's also how are you processing that data? What data is being stored? Where is it being located? So if you start bringing in other tools that start having their own databases of your end users, you need to make sure that that's a part of whatever process that you have for right to be forgotten or, informing people where their data is at. Because if you start working on this tool on the side that the rest of the team isn't aware of, you could have big problems. So that could be a marketing side, that could be customer success, that could be product, that could be a whole multitude of teams.
Yeah,
It's a
big
process.
BI, data science stuff too, right? Like we're bringing your data into our data warehouse and then it goes here to be cleansed and normalized. And then it goes here. And, that's all processing of PII information, right? Like it's important to know where it goes. And I also think too, from, certain industries that have other types of regulations like HIPAA, a lot of healthcare type companies and stuff. I've even seen like in Marketo where they have completely different, siphoned off partitions of and workspaces and things like that, where they're keeping data completely separate so that they don't accidentally miscommunicate in some way. But yeah, all those tech stack is super, super important. I mean, one thing that I have done in the past that I think is really helpful, and actually I even did this in-house when I worked at that data privacy company. I'd work with legal counsel, and I mean, it's as simple as like a Google sheet, right? Where you track, here's all of our MarTech, here's all the types of PII that we might collect on that person, right? Here's what we do with it. Here's how we know who we communicate with and who we don't, and what fields are actually marking in the system, what kind of values are available and stuff. And our legal counsel there, had me go through and fill all that out because he was the leader of our data governance committee. And it was like he overseed like all the data, right? And so, not every company is going to have like a data governance committee, although highly recommended, and definitely be a leader and start that up if you need to. But I mean, it's important to know just period where you are storing data and how you're using it. And, just having a simple tracker that he knew, like he didn't know what Marketo did and what we did in there other than emailing. Right. And so, but there's a lot of operational processing and things that we're doing, within all of the systems. And so it's important to kind of gain alignment and keep track of that.
Yeah. Love that. Broaden your team for this. This is not something that you can solve by yourself. This is not something that the marketing team can solve by itself. It takes an entire organization. And it was I felt like it was pretty easy to get executive buy-in when there was a threat of $4 million or this amount of your revenue, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. Make sure that we continue to reiterate that. Like just because something's in place doesn't mean that we're necessarily following it. So it's always a good time to kind of revisit and make sure that we are indeed fulfilling what we need, because in 5 years, a lot has been learned around that law.
Mhm.
There's a lot of unknowns. Like we got to kind of see how it's going to be processed. So
Yep. I think everybody was waiting at the edge of their seat, waiting to see like who the first fine was going to be, like, in the news, like who's the first big person that got docked for, not following the rules, and
exactly.
just kind of waiting to see where the apples fall.
Yep, 100%. Um, I always like to approach these types of projects just first coming to the table with something kind of prepared, right? So
Yeah.
that way we ensure that we have the right buyer's experience. How do you recommend our marketing ops partners and rev ops partners kind of approach this? Do we go to legal and say, hey, what's the minimum? What's the risk that you want to take on?
Mhm.
Do we come with a full project? What have you found to work pretty well?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely having a plan in place helps. I mean, I love a good flow chart. You can definitely flow chart out, knowing and documenting all your incoming sources of, where data is intaking, where you need to have the right opt-in or opt-out, procedures in place, and be able to really show that experience, and be able, and if you haven't mapped out your buyer experience yet, I know we talk about that in a different episode that you and I have done in the past. And we could potentially link that out. But yeah, map out your buyer experience, map out all those incoming points, and map out any kind of data processing points and what system it is, as well as any communication points. And, you can broadly tell, which, like, we know Germany is going to require double opt in, right?
Right.
But I did have a client once that actually had like a list of like 20 countries they wanted to be double opt in. And it's like, hey, cool. If that's what your legal counsel wants, like, we'll set that up. So it really depends. But I think coming with at least what to be the bare minimum that will create that great buyer experience, and presenting that to them, because oftentimes it's just a review and then they're like, yep, we feel good about that level of risk, and go ahead and move forward. But if you were to go to your legal counsel and just say, what do you recommend, they're just going to tell you what the law is, right? Like, they know what the law says, they can interpret the law, they can determine what they feel the right level of risk is, and like, they're going to be their opinion, right? But it's actually us in these revenue teams that need to do the hard work of like seeing where that fits in from an experience perspective, and how we actually operationalize that to make that actually come to life. And that way, as long as legal feels like, we're covering our bases for if we get audited, or somebody requests the right to be forgotten, or, somebody just asks a question or whatever, that we've got all those scenarios kind of thought out. So, it definitely takes some strategic prep, I would say, to kind of map things out appropriately. But it also probably doesn't need to get super in the weeds with legal, as long as they understand what you're going for. Then you can work with the appropriate teams internally to get all the right fields set up in your instance, and make sure that you agree on the, pick list that you're using for consent status, and where people are consenting in, and things like that. So that's kind of where I'd start.
That's great. Um, just briefly, in case if somebody hasn't had the opportunity to, lead one of these initiatives, maybe they've inherited their instance. What are some common statuses that you've seen to represent various opt-in
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
So
is that right? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I mean, if you have your checkbox on your forms, right, and people are explicitly checking the box, we usually call that a explicit opt-in. And because there are countries that require double opt-in, meaning you check the box and then you get a confirmation email and now need to say, yes, in fact, that was me, confirm me. We call that explicit single or explicit double, for when they're explicitly checking the box saying, yep, opt me in, I want to receive these communications. There's also implicit opt-in. That may be people that are like, hey, we just market to the US, we just do business in the US, and everything is kind of contained within. We're just going to take the opt-out mentality. Maybe they're marking people as implicit opt-in, right? They're implicitly opted in until they decide they wish to opt out. There are some other ones that you can do that are related to Canada's anti-spam legislation, or CASL, as we like to call it, CASL. And so, there's inquiry consent. So if somebody wants to fill out a form for contact us or a demo request, and they're explicitly raising their hand to say, contact me now, you do have 6 months to be able to market to them. Sort of they call it inquiry consent, but it's sort of like a temporary implicit opt-in, basically. But if they don't explicitly opt in within that 6-month window, you do need to opt them back out. And then also for existing business relationships, so customers or potentially partners, you have a longer window. For CASL, you do have 2 years, but within those 2 years, if again they don't explicitly opt in within that window of time, you no longer have that opt-in and you have to opt them out. So, you can kind of take it that level deeper as well. Those are some of the typical ones that I've seen. When you're looking at double opt-in, one status that you might have is like pending explicit, right? Like they're still pending that second step, right? They did the first thing, or they checked the box, but they haven't clicked that confirmation email yet. And those people are just should be like a Marketo, they call it marketing suspended, right? Where you're not, it's because the system's going to block them from being able to be emailed until they hit that double opt-in confirmation. And so it's sort of like this, like, I was going to say purgatory, but I don't think that's the right word, but but like it's like this holding tank that they're just in, right? So that's better. A holding tank that you really can't do anything with those people until they hit the double opt-in, right? So those are some of the statuses that I'd look at.
Absolutely. And then I know one that we're going to talk about in the future is this unknown bucket. The people that get into our database and we're like, did they opt in? Did they not opt in? You need to be able to have a place for those folks, right? I think that a lot of our offline activities take place there, and then just a lot of our integrations, right? Whether it be with a data vendor or something like that.
Yeah, because ideally you would have country coming in off of, any source. But let's be realistic, that doesn't 100% always happen. And if you don't know their country, you can't assume opt-in. You can't just say, oh, I have their implicit opt-in because we don't know where they are. Because you don't know where they are. They could be in Germany, which requires double opt-in, right? Like you can't just assume. So even if it's, like a US trade show, you can't assume that person actually resides and, works in the US. So you've got to have that unknown bucket for people that are missing country, or just like sources that you may miss and you didn't think of, or you have a new data entry source that comes up later that you forgot to add in. So it's good to kind of keep an eye on that unknown bucket.
Absolutely. Good. So what are some other tips that we want to dive into? We've talked about mapping it out, which I absolutely agree with. Just being able to visualize it is super helpful, especially when bringing other people on. What about like the website? What's a good approach on the website?
Yeah. So, you've got forms on your website. You need to be able to have an opt-in checkbox on there. Most laws are going to require that to be unchecked. So you cannot pre-check the checkbox. In a lot of marketing automation systems, you have the option to pre-check it if you want. But I would never suggest that. You always want to uncheck it, have the box available for somebody to opt into, along with a little language next to it of what they're opting into, so they fully understand what they're doing when they check that box. And probably a link to your privacy policy as well, right? So that if they want to go check out more details before opting in, that they can. I know some customers, like some clients, will look at US, and whether they check it or not, they're still going to just assume implicit until they opt out. Again, some companies though that I work with, like, are very global, And even for US, if they do not check the box, they do not market to them. So it really just depends on what your legal counsel's advice is and their appetite for risk. But definitely need to have that on there. And then just ensure too that your privacy policy is updated. And if you have an unsubscribe page or a preference center available, oftentimes they can be linked within the privacy policy as well. So if somebody, finds it and they want to, subscribe, I do find though that if you link it in the privacy policy, every once in a while you'll find new records coming in your database off of the preference center form or off of the unsubscribe form, because they're maybe putting in some other kind of variation of their email that wasn't the exact wording of how their email already exists in the system. So keep an eye on that. But
see that so often, and they're the people who are upset the most, and you empathize with them, right?
Yeah.
They've been trying to opt out, but they keep on they don't realize that it's being forwarded to an alias or that they had a typo in the name or anything like that. So it's always good when you can make sure that you do that due diligence, find out what they're actually trying to unsubscribe from.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel for marketers who are trying to meet their goals. They're trying to get the most out of their database, right? So I understand the desires to do this, the desires to try and figure out how can I bend the rules as much as possible to get in front of as many people as possible. I've had some tough conversations both ways. And I always just go back to, at the end of the day, yeah, you can try and increase that, but we talk about it all the time. Like you need to target people who are interested in it.
Right.
If they've either had a process of not opting into your communication even though you offered it, or heaven forbid opting out and trying to figure out how else can I get in front of this person, it's like they're not interested. So focus where you know that you have interest and make that experience super good. And you can build up your audience that way and find other ways to get in front of those teams, social, display, all of the pieces that we have at our disposal.
I mean, that's why marketing teams, try to just drive demand, right? Because driving demand is different than lead generation, Right. And if you aren't going to get the people opting in as a lead, at least drive demand so that you can continue to get people to your site to explicitly hopefully opt in and decide to communicate with you, right? And then that's also why people do ABM, right? Account-based marketing. And they're doing a lot of outbound efforts that are not just email, right? Where they can pick up the phone and just try to prospect and stuff. So, definitely there's options out there. It's not, it's not the end of the world if you aren't able to email as many people as you thought you were going to be able to. Right.
Exactly.
Because emailing the right people versus just emailing everybody because you are looking at volume is two different things.
Two way different things. Absolutely. Good. What do we do from a marketing automation platform CRM perspective?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good time to update your data dictionary because you're going to need some new fields created. Thinking through all the different fields and field types that you're going to need, right? Because you're going to need like date timestamps for when, consent changes happen. You're going to need that opt-in status, field where you can track the status. A lot of my clients use like an opt-in source field as well. So they know like, oh, they were opted in via a content form on the website or the contact us form or our newsletter sign up or this or that or the other thing, right? I personally also love having like a historical consent notes field, I call it. And this actually I set up, which it works really easily in Marketo using tokens, lead tokens. So you can actually track consent changes over time. So if today I opted in and then later I unsubscribe and then later I come back and change my mind and want to re-opt in or whatever, all of those like consent status changes and the date and times are basically added together with semicolons and lead tokens and stuff like that. And it's just like one big, huge, long text area field. And that I always felt was really important. So if the company got audited or whatever, you have like a full view. So you don't just have the current consent information, you have all of their consent changes over time. So I like having fields like that too, just to kind of keep track of things long term. So yeah, there's a series of fields that you're going to need created, and most of the time you're going to want them in your CRM and your marketing automation platform. So if you're working with Salesforce and Marketo, let's say, you're going to want to create those in Salesforce and let them sync back to Marketo so that your data isn't just in your marketing automation platform. You definitely don't want that. You want it kind of, most people do it in their CRM because it's sort of their system of truth, right? And a lot of the integrations connect through there, right? But you need to be able to make sure that any of the systems where you might have a consent change are going to be able to, flip the switch, and you're going to be able to visibly see those data value changes in each of the systems.
Makes sense.
So yeah, start with that. Also, just make sure that you actually have at least a bare minimum of an unsubscribe page in your marketing automation platform, or as a landing page or a page on your website, right? Or a preference center. I know you and I have both done preference center projects with clients and stuff like that. I think the biggest key about the preference center is it can create a really great buyer experience for people to choose what they want to opt into or opt out. But you also need to follow the preferences that people select in the preference center, right? It's not just there for looks. And I have seen, a lot of time go into preference center projects, and then the clients don't, they don't really follow it. And it's like, well, if you're going to offer these preferences, you need to adhere by them, right? Don't just email the person because you want a bigger list for this send or that thing when it's not something they actually chose to opt into. So, that's kind of my 2 cents on preference centers. But I've seen some really slick ones that are a really great experience. But again, the most important thing is you actually adhere to what those preferences are, not so much what it looks like.
Agreed. Yes. I'm just gonna speak to it right now. I love when companies proactively send out those messages of like, hey, Father's Day is coming up. If you want to be excluded from marketing communications because it's not easy for you, or Mother's Day, or whatever holiday. I like that because it's like a very purpose-driven preference center, temporary, but you're showing that you're trying to make the right buyer experience for somebody, and that could be an opportunity for you, depending on what it is. I know that's sort of a sidetrack, but as I think about preferences, it's like you're really just trying to build the right experience, but once again, you have to then adhere to it.
Yeah. And, I think just like start more simple, like don't create 20 categories, because I don't know if somebody's going to spend the time to look at all that and really choose, right? They're just going to instead just unsubscribe all. Or if you not only have like the complexity of a lot of different types of categories, like that means that you are segmenting your emails that nuanced, right?
Right.
And if you aren't, like, just be more general with it. Like, do you want event information? Do you want product information? Do you want this? Like 3 options, don't go way too far into the, very nuanced situation if that's actually not how you are segmenting within marketing.
Agreed. Well, good. Joy, we're coming up near the end of our time. I do want to end as we should end all projects, and that is with a wonderful dashboard. I know that you and your team have been building out some really great dashboards for clients. As you think about GDPR or compliance and a dashboard, sometimes that's like, what, really? But any tips for folks who may want to create some more visibility into how those programs are working?
Yeah, I mean, you can really create a dashboard for most anything. So GDPR opt-in stuff is no different. I mean, you have a set of fields, right? So you can create a report and throw things into a dashboard. So, I personally, we kind of mentioned on it earlier, but one of the biggest benefits that I love being able to see in a dashboard is it just makes monitoring super easy. You just click of a button, refresh the dashboard, and now you can see your current numbers. And I like to look at the opt-in status, counts, and keep an eye, especially on like a month by month over time basis in your dashboard, because you can see trends, right? And if it's like, oh gosh, why in June did we get this huge influx of people marked as unknown, right? Like maybe we had a new data source we didn't count for. Did we forget to put country on a list import, or whatever it was? And so you can kind of pinpoint a lot of those things and go back and make batch updates and make the corrections so that moving forward, everything is accounted for and everything. So I like to keep an eye on that, but I do like to kind of look at it like trending. So you can really see like what your opt-in and opt-out stuff is month over month. You can decide to, even do a different marketing strategy off of it, right? What type of campaigns you put in market and how you're communicating. And oh my gosh, like we received way influx of opt-outs this month. Like, why was that? What did we do? Let's go back and look at some of the campaigns we put into market. Like, what would have drove like this huge influx, right? And so it's a good way to kind of draw some analysis, go back and ask questions to revisit your strategy, and take a look at that. So you'll be able to draw those month over month comparisons in a dashboard because you've got your date time fields, right? Like you've got all the right fields set up, and it just makes it very easy to kind of draw some conclusions from and make some decisions like any dashboard should.
Absolutely. I mean, it's there to help you monitor. It's there to help you optimize.
Yep.
And that's the goal, right? Is to make sure that we're communicating people effectively in ways that they want to be communicated to. And this is a program that gives you a lot of visibility into that for sure.
Yep.
Joy, if there was one key takeaway for our audience, what do you want somebody to leave with today?
Yeah. I mean, just don't be afraid to understand the law, to audit your existing program. Go do it right now. Like go audit, right? And if the audit is, oh no, this doesn't exist, right? let's get some understanding in place and get it set it up. But if it does exist, maybe the starting point is, if you feel like it's pretty sound, go and make one of those dashboards, right? I mean, maybe that's your takeaway, and do some monitoring, see how you may want to optimize or what you may need to tweak in your strategy to move forward. So depending on where you're at, if you're at ground zero, or you feel really good and strong about it, and you've already kind of been there, done that with your legal counsel and all your revenue teams, like just go, start auditing and do a little monitoring and create a cadence around that monitoring too. Don't just do it once and then forget about it, because there are new data tools, there's new integrations, there's new data sources, there's new everything, and, coming out all the time. And you don't want to miss any points of entry or anything like that. So definitely create a cadence and keep it ongoing.
Well, Joy, as always, thank you. This was fantastic information. I think super helpful for anybody. If you're an expert in compliance, GDPR, built out five of these programs in the past, or if you're brand new and you're approaching this for the very first time, I think that our audience has been able to get something out of it. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your experience as well. So
thanks for having me.
You have been listening to the Revenue Growth Architects podcast by CS2. Today, we talked about compliance and all things opt-in and opt-out. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review. Your feedback is greatly appreciated, and it helps us get in front of more people. Thank you very much, and have a great day.